What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Identity of Jedi Show podcast. I'm going solo mode today. Samir had some things to take care of, some family issues. So all the best to Samir and his family, but he will be back because we have got two back-to-back like amazing guests. I can't wait for you guys to see these once we get these edited out because the guest today is an amazing person in his own right because he'll never admit this. So I'm saying all this now before I bring him on stage. He'll never admit it, but special guest this week is Paul Lanzi. I have had the honor, the privilege of knowing Paul. He's going to correct me when he comes on. Man, it hasn't been 10 years. It can't have been 10 years. Maybe it's like 6 or 7. But this is one of the things I love about the identity industry. Me and Paul met through the identity industry, and since then have struck up a friendship. When I was at Cellpoint, at Amazon, he was at Immediate. Now in his next endeavor, and so it's been awesome just getting a chance to know him, have dinner with him, spend quality time hanging out at conferences, nerding out about identity. So excited to have him on the podcast this week. So we're going to bring him on and get straight to it. Don't forget, before we do that, if you like the podcast, if you like what's going on, rate, comment, subscribe on whatever platform you listen to this on. It goes a long way, more than you know it does, and we appreciate it. So without further ado, bring on Paul.
Hey, Mr. David Lee. Good to see you, man.
You too, man.
It actually has been 10 years since we first got to hang out. So we are that old, sadly. Sadly.
Man.
And I like your privilege joke there. You kind of built in a little bit of a privilege joke. That was nice.
You got that.
I got that. Yeah, I see what you're putting down there. Thank you for that. Yeah.
Not just a pretty face, this guy, those are talents a little bit.
Well, so I asked you before we got started here, is this going to be a video thing or an audio thing? And I had to express to you that I have a face made for audio.
No, you don't, my friend. You have a face made for everybody. Listen, I am not going to rest, Paul. Like the next 10 years of our friendship is going to be me making sure that people know how awesome you are. I hope you know that. You need to get ready for this, right? So
sounds like trouble. Sounds like real trouble.
Oh man, so how are you today, man? What's going on? What's new? Wait, first before we do this, because of course I know all about you, know how cool you are, but for those who aren't as privileged to know about Paul, give the people a little bit of intro.
All right. Well, let's see. I've been doing technology for a little bit, actually. My very first, you might actually not know this part of my story. So my very first company I co-founded when I was 13. I helped start the first internet service provider in Humboldt County, which is a very rural part of California where I grew up. It's way behind the Red curtain. Yeah, people don't know this. There's 6 hours of California north of San Francisco.
No,
and that's the part of California.
I know about Humboldt County. You started an internet service provider at third? What? Okay. Yep. Hold on, folks.
Hold the show. Yeah, it was back in the days of dial. This is 1993. So this is back in the days of dial-up internet and PPP and SLIP. And, we had sort of America Online was a thing back then, but if you wanted real actual internet access, there wasn't an option up there. And so I co-founded this company with actual adults. I was the only kid, thankfully, but I got to run tech support, and it turned out to be a great introduction to technology for me and helped me build up a lot of empathy for user experiences, helping, folks who back then it was very complicated to get on the internet. You had to run this is before Windows had TCP built in. So you had to run your own separate Windows TCP stack and hook it up to a modem. And, the vagaries of telecom in a rural place like Humboldt County meant that there was a lot of modem drops and, telephone problems. So there was just a lot to troubleshoot. And like I said, it taught me a lot of empathy for end user experiences, and moved that forward and ended up working on identity. So my first projects in identity were when I was at Genentech, and Genentech had been an early adopter of IGA solutions, and specifically the one that came way before SailPoint. We were still using it. In fact, by that point, it was now known as, I think it was known as Sun IDM, and that was later known as some Oracle product. But it was all Waveset. It was the underlying technology still. And so I got to learn about what does a terrible IGA solution look like. But we were the very first company, and probably I would hazard a guess that we were the only company crazy enough to figure out how to hook up Waveset to Google. At that time it was Google for Domains provisioning and deprovisioning APIs, which is just a wild time. So Genentech was also an early adopter of Google Mail and Calendar for enterprise. And so hooking that up to Waveset was one of my first IT security related projects and
Jesus.
identity. Yeah. So we got
Sure.
to do some strange and terrible things to make that work. But yeah, kept
Bet you
working.
did.
Yeah. So worked in the biotech industry for a long time before co-founding Remediant with one of my biotech friends, Tim Keeler. We were co-founders of Remediant, which was really focused on how do you think about privilege access in a different way? We had seen this privilege sprawl problem in every single place we had ever worked and thought, maybe there's something we can do about this. And so built up I think some pretty cool technology and then sold that to Netrix at the end of 2022.
That yeah. Now he's sitting back in his yacht counting his millions and doing me the favor of coming on my podcast. Look at that.
Oh, I wish there was yachts and millions involved, but
Yeah.
no. So these days I'm doing consulting work. So I've started a consulting company called Identivate, and we're really focused on how do we help those that are trying to move forward the ball in identity and identity security. So advising some seed and Series A startups that are in the identity security space, as well as helping larger companies, Fortune 500 companies, rethink how do they do identity? How can they apply some of the new technology to identity, and how can they do everything from retool their identity team to retool their identity stack?
Nice. Well, there you go, everybody.
It's a living.
Listen, I just learned new things about my friend Paul Lanzi, who I've apparently known for 10. Dude, I cannot. It has. I know it's been 10 years. Now that I think of it,
It's been 10 years.
it
Yeah.
doesn't seem like it's been 10 years.
We were babies back then, David. That's why it seems.
Yeah, I had none of this. None of this was here. None of this gray. This was nowhere to be
Yeah,
seen.
that's-
Okay, so I'm trying to think. The first memory I have, was it DC? We went to dinner in DC. What was that though? Conference in DC. I remember we went to dinner.
My memory is terrible enough. I don't remember that, but I do remember hanging out with you at Navigate a couple of
Yes.
times, other industry conferences as well.
Yeah.
And yes,
Gartner? Anyway, doesn't
well, I
matter.
met your boss at the time first, so I got to know him first, and then he introduced me to you.
You're talking about Joe, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. I mean, yeah, it was the Tech Alliance program.
that's right. That's right. We were alliancings. Makes
we
sense.
were alliancing, yes. So, good times, man. Let's talk about what's going on in identity right now, right? So,
Hmm.
interesting week.
It's been a big
Right.
week.
It was a pretty big week. So we talked about this in the kind of the pre-show meeting. I specifically Beyond Trust. So we'll start with the whole Beyond Trust purchasing end title, right? And I want to say I'll say this now, and of course I'll be wrong because I'll go look because I'm probably forgetting somebody. Somebody will send me an email and be like, "Oh, you forget about this company." But I feel
Hmm.
like with Beyond Trust, this is the last of the quote unquote old guard to kind of make this acquisition and firmly cement themselves, kind of these platform wars that I've called it the last 2 years, right? Everybody arming up and kind of doing all these things. So,
Which, by the way, you
uh,
called very early. I have credit where credit's due. You saw this. You saw this trend even before Gartner saw it. I think. Gartner. I think Gartner's headlines got a lot of attention on it, but this was a David Lee special long before it was a Gartner special.
I appreciate it. Much like most geniuses, I will not be appreciated until long after my time.
Well, I'm going to appreciate you right now.
Thanks, man. No, yeah, you know what? It's so funny because now I'm at the point in both my life and career where I remember some of my early mentors telling me that like it's like this whole thing is just cyclical. Everything repeats itself. Like
Yes.
there's nothing new anymore. And I was just like, whatever. You're just whatever cynical.
Old and burnt out. Right.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And now I'm the guy that's like, oh crap. You're right. But I mean, that's why when I looked at this, I was like, this is where this is headed because and part of it
Mm.
was because as I was talking to customers, I was starting to hear the same type of things that I heard back then when suites were such a thing. Was like, I am tired of paying all this money for integration. None of this stuff works. Give me one. I started hearing that one throat to choke because I remember the first time I heard that, I was like, that's awfully dark to say in a business, and said it. But I started hearing that again, right? And I'm just like, yeah, this is leading back towards a way that, you know, we're gonna there's gonna be consolidation. It just customers are asking for it. It's now starting to actually make sense. Some of these use cases are merging together, and there's so much for them to manage that it just doesn't make sense that when you're paying 2 and 3x for implementation and integration over the cost that you're paying for the license, like
Right.
that's something's going to give there, right? So,
I also
um,
think it comes down to the scarcity of infosec talent. And you
mm,
have talked about this many times on your show about the lack of diversity in infosec, but that also that one of the implications of lack of diversity in infosec also means just a lack of number of human beings that can do these
right,
jobs. And so, if you're a Fortune 500 company, you're a CISO, and you're trying to hire an engineering team to glue all these solutions together, like good luck because those people are hard to find, they're hard to retain, and even if you find good ones, their their knowledge of the market tends to get out of date pretty quickly. And so all those things mean that you'd much rather have the vendor do it. Now, I'm of two minds about this particular problem. Right, one is that yes, the platforms make sense, and this 100% is a cyclical thing. Like we'll be talking about best of breed, 4 years from now again.
right.
But I think the other thing is that the vendor community has a responsibility to make it much easier. So it doesn't require an entire engineering group to glue together best of breed solutions. And so I did a lot of work within the IDSA, which I think you had also contributed to at
Yeah,
various points. To encourage vendors to think about how do you create better interfaces so that it's less work for the customers to try and make these things actually work together. And I think we have some good successes we can point to. I think SSF, or which formerly known as SSE, is actually really promising in being able to do this in a real way. And then I think I do some work on the SCIM interface as well. And so SCIM is a 10-year-old interface technology, but it's actually there's a lot there that we can do to make it easier for
yes,
these applications and solutions to communicate with each other. So I'm of two minds. So I think there's more vendors should do, and also platforms are they're a thing. Like that's a real thing.
they are, and I think so. I'm. I promise, listeners, we'll get back to the Beyond Trust acquisition in a second, but like, I like this rabbit hole we're going down. Like, I think that why I'm more optimistic about platforms coming this time around is in the way that we build applications, and we're so much more open with the applications, open API interfaces.
Right.
And so this time around, and I'll say this and I'll take all the okay, everybody that's listening, aggregators, this is me, David Lee saying this, not anybody else. But I think the key this time is that when you actually build open platforms that are built in the modern way that we do with most, like open Microsoft architectures, things like that, or whatever, where I have APIs, I have standards, I have ways to interact and do certain things, where it's more like when you look at something like a Salesforce and the platform they built, where it's like, here
Yeah.
is how we do this. Here's access to the objects and models, and here's APIs, and go build what you want and put it in there, right? We will handle just kind of the infrastructure and the general process and give you a general way of how to do this, but define your process how you want to define it and build it on top of our platform. I don't think we're going to see that from, I would be surprised if we're going to see that from what I'll call the old guard. And I know they'll take offense to that, but I mean, I'm sorry. Like, you've been around for 20 years.
Hasn't happened
like,
yet. Right.
right. So, but I do think as we get into this, kind of platform war era, I think some of maybe the newer companies, some of the smaller, more agile companies will start to say, okay, as we look at this, and as we either through acquisition have to integrate all this stuff, we're going to have to find a better way to integrate it anyway. So let's open
Mm.
that up to our customers and partners. But I also think we're going to see like younger companies coming in that now, if you're starting right now, so Paul, if you and I say we're going to start an identity company right now, we have no choice. We're going to build a platform. We have to,
Yeah.
right? So then we're going to look around and go, okay, we're going to build it on modern technology, modern architectures. And I was like, hey, well, where can we gain advantages? I can't go build a connector library as big as SailPoint or Beyond Trust. I can't go do. But what I can do is I can use standards and I can empower my customers or partners to kind of build on top of it. So if I just make more of this stuff open, like I'll give a shout out to Conductor One and Alex Boley and that team, what they did with their Baton SDK connector framework, right?
Mm.
Which again, something that's old is new again. We've had connector frameworks come back around again for a while, right? But
Yeah.
again, same type of thing is like, hey, listen, we'll standardize connectivity. Like, who cares? Like, we're not going to make our money off of connectivity. Like, here's an open source. Everybody can go do this. Let's focus on like what we do with the data we get back from the connectivity, right? And it's that type of thinking that I think this time platforms are going to last maybe a little bit longer. Customers may get more value as we start to see that. But I think it's going to be, I think this next 2 years is going to be rough. Honestly,
Yeah.
like it's a lot of IP and tech debt that has been swallowed by organizations, and having been on both sides of that and now having sat on the vendor side and looked at all the things that have to get done, like please customers don't let anybody fool you and think that you're going to see anything of a consolidated nature in less than a year. you won't.
Yeah.
At
A
2
year may be
years and it's lucky.
optimistic.
Yeah.
Yeah. But in the interest of all things that are old or new again, the closed ecosystems, right? So there is a tendency for platforms to close off their ecosystems in order to keep customers inside those ecosystems, and we can point to lots of examples of that. So do you think that as these identity platforms, the rise of the identity platforms that we're seeing now will mean that, 2 years from now they are more closed or that they're more open?
Okay. I got to answer this two ways. What I want to happen is they'll be more open. That's what I
I
want to
do
see.
too. I wish, right?
But
If
but I
wishes
but
were
I
horses,
but
right?
but I think they're going to be more closed because the leaders out there, again, that's what they know and that's how they've done it, right?
Right.
However, we always see with each evolution, like somebody comes in and innovates and disrupts. I do think we're going to see a player or a couple of players come out and truly push for that open model. Like I was really excited at one point when we built a plugin framework at Cellpoint and put that out there and started to see like we had partners and customers building on top of it. And we were really pushing internally at that time. It was a small collective of us. Clearly we didn't win. It was like,
Mhm.
let's make Cellpoint a platform, right? Like let's make IIQ, like here's a plugins. Here's the thing. It fits right in. Build like kind of build what you want. Let's create a store where people can partners and customers can share ideas and create these things. Like this is all functionality that don't put on your product and engineering teams. You know they'll never get to. Focus on the main things, right? And we had seen kind of the success stories of other platforms and things like that. I think that model will work, and I think we'll see that in identity within the next 5 years. Now, whether or
Yeah.
not it'll catch on, I think that's going to be the problem. And it's going to need one of the bigger boys to kind of lean into that, or to really catch on through the market. But I don't know. We could see somebody like shoot up like a rocket and really get that kind of grassroots, auth zero ish type, the developer following
Recapture.
that says like, yeah, like, hey, we're getting so much done by just building on this platform and doing these things on identity. So I'm excited
Yeah.
to see it.
Well, and I think that's what Gartner referred to as like the identity fabric, which was always more of a concept than a thing you could actually go out and buy. Because,
Right.
like you said, none of the major vendors were offering anything that looked like an open solution set for open platform for identity exchange.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you talked about you mentioned something else there about tech debt around these integrations, and I think this week we saw we saw an example of tech debt
Yeah.
coming back to bite somebody. You want to talk about that?
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, I'll tee it off, but like you follow most of the thread, so I'll let you go on it. But yeah, so there's a Delinea had to kind of do a shutdown, like it was like 5 hours, right? Last Friday, based on a vulnerability that was found in Psychotic, which is built on ASP, right? That basically gave people access to any of the vaults and secrets, right? If you use this kind of vulnerability. And so a very good example of what we're talking about with this tech deck, and like you look at Delinea, right? So with their recent FastPath acquisition, here's what they're looking at. So Delinea is made up of Psychotic,
Centrify.
Centrify. Is there one more before?
Uh, there's several other ones. They acquired, I think, Authamize. Is that right?
Right. So Psychotic, Centrify, Optimize, and then FastPath. Now,
Right.
FastPath just 2 years ago purchased IDEO and was in the middle of their own consolidation. So now,
Right.
like Delinea on their hands literally has 5 different products that they have to all integrate and maintain right now.
Right. And it's
Let
not just 5 different code bases, right? Those 5 different customer sets, that's 5 different selling organizations, 5 different SE, like 5 different engineering organizations. And by the way, probably, I don't know this for sure, but probably 5 different languages. And one of which is ASP.NET, which Microsoft end of life a long time ago.
so this is I'm gonna let's do. We're gonna take our audience, a little bit behind the curtains wall because we've both been on like the vendor side and having to run and engineer products and get them out the door, right? Like this isn't a for those of you maybe listening who like maybe you've never been an engineer and you've never done like you're basically trying to take five five different teams going in completely different direction. And the number one saying, I need you all to agree that we're going to go north. Okay. Now I've got to say, we're all going to go north, Well, Paul wants to take camels. I want to take horses, right? Jerry wants to hop in his Dodge SRT. Like, so
Right.
now we got to figure out, okay, let's at least agree, like, what transportation mode we're going to take to get there, right? Hey, no camels. All right. So we're going to rule out camels. Great. How we have to decide right now the business side comes in, right? Yes, we acquired all these companies, but we can't take on the cost of all 5 teams. So now we got to start saying we're going to cut down these teams, which teams are going to cut down, how we're going to get these teams to one team, who's going to be the architects, who's going to be the product managers, who's going to be the leaders setting all this. People, these are things that take months to figure out. That's
Right.
before we've done anything. We haven't done any work. We
No
haven't
keyboards have
changed,
been touched at that point.
right,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
At minimum, we've maintained what's already there because we have to, because to your point, we have customers,
That's
right?
right.
That we currently have to service and roadmap features that we probably already promised them, patches that we have to go back and fill. So something like this at minimum takes a year just to figure out structurally, how are we going to attack this? So if we're lucky in a year, we know we've all agreed to go north. We've all agreed to use horses and we figured out who's all coming. Great.
That's right.
Now,
Meanwhile, the customers are like, "Where's my integrated platform? I I read about it in the news a year ago. Where's
and
my thing?" And you're like, "All right, cool. We're ready to get started on that
yeah,
now."
because oh, by the way, marketing and
Right.
sales, which they should be, I've gotten better. I do not despise them as much as I used to, as they should be, is off telling that integrated platform story. It's
They have
coming.
to.
Hey, we are all going north. We're going to be on the fastest horses. We're going to deliver the best features and food. Like it is going to be, you only need to come to us. And so then, yeah, to your point, the customer's like, great, this sounds awesome. When is it? Where is
Where
it? I want to buy it.
where
Like,
can I have it now? Where is it? I'd like it now, please.
right. So
Yeah.
that's just so if we look at all of that, right? That's just Delinea. Now we have Beyond Trust, Cellpoint, Okta, CyberArk. Like they're all going through this all at the same time. Honestly, the only one is Savient. They're the only ones that haven't done a major acquisition in the last 24 to 36 months. So they don't they're not facing it now. Now, granted, will that stay the same? I don't think so. I think so now it's like it's very interesting from the business standpoint, like with these other companies, is there pressure
Hmm.
to go and like, do they need to make an acquisition? Does Savient look at this as like, oh, maybe we need to go try and buy an ITR company, or do we maybe have to get into the IDP? Like, what do we do? How do we stay within this? Right. So there is a perfect storm brewing right now, just from a how do we manage this perspective that is going to be very interesting of the value that customers are going to get out of this, right? I would advise any customer right now, like looking to purchase, I'm like, I'd stay on the sideline this year if you can, right?
Yeah,
If at all you can, I'd stay on the sideline and let some of these companies kind of figure it out and they could kind of show you some value. If you have to make a purchase this year, definitely know the use cases you want to see. Do not let the vendors drive that discussion. You drive that discussion. I want
yeah,
to see this use case, right? And I don't want to see it in your standard environment, in your demo environment that's all clean that you do. No, 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 no. That's nice. Great. Now show me this feature. And like, if it's me, I'm telling them, build it in front of me.
that's right. Let me be a design partner for it so I can
Yeah.
actually get the thing that I want out of it. I do want to wind back a little bit to Delinea, and and I want to first of all express I have a lot of empathy for the team at Delinea that had to deal with. They had this dropped on their it ended up in public disclosure,
Yeah.
and so that team got a call because only terrible things happen on Fridays. Got a the team inside of Delinea, engineering team at Delinea got a call on Friday. Hey, by the way, there's a publicly released disclosure about a 0-day ability to grab this data out of Thycotic secret server, right? And they had to immediately respond. And so the way that they responded was twofold. One, they took down their SaaS service, which is like that took some guts to make that call,
Yeah.
but it was probably the right call to make. And then immediately start working on patching their on-prem solution as well. So I have a lot of empathy for the team that had to deal with this. Now, but let's pick this apart a little bit. That cost optimization that you talked about, this is a hypothesis. I have no inside information about this, but my hunch is at some point there was an internal security team from Thycotic or from one of the acquired entities that got laid off or whatever. And so there was no one watching the security at inbox. And so when CERT had tried to do a number of notifications to Delinea, that CERT never got a response. And so, the way that this would the way the responsible disclosure procedure should have worked is that Delinea should have had a patch for this. It should have been released on an on cycle or potentially off cycle, doesn't really matter. But it should have been done before there was public disclosure. But their lack of responsiveness to the researcher and then later to CERT meant that it ended up in the public eye. And so I think that one of the other costs that comes with trying to do these integrations is not just all the engineering work and the team rationalization and stuff like that. It's the missed opportunities like this, where, if someone's not watching that security ad inbox and it
Yeah.
ends up in public disclosure, you can lose a lot of reputation very quickly with not just the customer base that you already have, but with a potential future customer
Yeah.
base as
Future
well.
customers.
So I think there's a cautionary story to be learned from Delinea's, I'll put it frankly, their goof up here in not being responsive to CERT.
Yeah. It's, it's, it doesn't always come down to just numbers, right? And
Right.
unfortunately, having been a part of a number of these M&A, deals on different sides of it, right? Like, I despise the fact that at a certain point, that's what it comes down to, right? People are just kind of looking at numbers and how things go and stuff like that or whatever. And, and I get it because it's hard to make big decisions like that when they're nuanced, right? Because there's just so much detail and drudgery to go through that it's like, okay, we can't cross every single T and dot every single I. I get
Yeah.
that, right? You do have to kind of make some kind of higher decisions. And so, it's one of those areas that I don't like to talk about a whole lot because I'm one of those people, like, I don't like to talk about problems and not have solutions. I don't know a solution for that, right? I don't know how to make that process any better, right?
Well, I think in Delinea's case, I think having, they've talked in the past about their focus on product security. And I think this was a red flag that they actually haven't done as much in that space as they thought, as they maybe say that they do. So you don't hate marketing people. I don't hate them either. But like there's been a lot said about Delinea's product security. And then it turns out that, well, actually maybe there were some pretty significant things missed here.
Right.
This wasn't some super arcane, exploit, right? This was a relatively straightforward exploit and ended up in public disclosure, which is never
Yeah.
the thing you want. So I
Right.
think that, not losing, I guess, keeping ProdSec higher in the priority list of things to maintain as you rationalize out those teams is probably the lesson learned here.
Yeah. And it also means, right? So it brings up another point. Like, you have to, one of the benefits of best of breed as a vendor is you could kind of hide,
Hmm.
be honest, right? Like, I'm only responsible for
Yes.
this small portion, right?
Right.
I'm not the, like, blinders on. This is what I'm focused on. I'm over here, right? Like,
Yep.
I'm not over here in authentication chain. I'm not here. I'm not here. I'm not here. I'm here. I'm just right here. Now you're a platform. So what did you do? Your attack surface and your exposure just got that much bigger. And now you want to be the single planet glass. You want to be the one person they come to. Well, guess what? That you're it for all of that, right? So this also does mean for a lot of these vendors, right, to start thinking about, like, okay, you want to call yourself an identity security company because it's nice to market and you're telling them how you can do all these things. That S and then that and those three words also means for you as well, right?
That's right.
How are you developing a secure security platform because you now are in the attack chain? You now are part of how people use your platform in the different parts to address their security needs, and that means you become a bigger target, right?
That's right.
So,
And the
and
shared security model that the IaaS providers, they've sort of figured this out, right? Because they become a huge part of the attack surface for any company where they're providing infrastructure. They came up with this shared security model, which is fantastic. I think it's worked out as well as probably any model else could have been. I don't know that that model applies when you're an identity security platform. I don't know that the shared security model makes sense when it's you that's supposed to be protecting your customers, right?
I don't know. I mean, I want to digest that a little bit. I think some of it applies, right? I mean,
Sure.
there's parts of the actual product that you need to secure that, okay, that's on the vendor to own. But I mean, similar to the IaaS model, right? I can't own the way you configure it, right? Like,
That's right.
so, but but to it is different, right? Like, because with infrastructure, like, you're not, like, so you're not taking Delineas and setting up like ports and VCPs and routers and like you're not doing
Exactly.
that, and how like things actually move route, right? Because you're not actually managing infrastructure with that route. So it is a little bit. So it's gonna be interesting things to figure out, right? I I will say what I want to see, because I think it's going to be needed, is and I've talked about this a lot. So people are probably tired of me saying it. Like the going back to last year, the Okta breaches. This is to pick
Yep.
on Okta. Calm down, folks. But it's Beyond Trust's response to it, right? That was the first time I'd seen a real like an identity company truly post like a security based response. Like, hey, here's we found it. Here's how we found it, and it was just a straight like you can follow the steps of how we found this, what we did, how we reported. Like, I think more that's going to be needed by different identity companies and different teams. So we can, like, guys, we're all learning this because now all of a sudden we're taking identity practitioners. We're saying you are now part of security. And it's funny. I saw a
Yep.
post from Lance Peterman on
Uh-huh.
LinkedIn. I think it was like last week where he was just like, I'm paraphrasing Lance. Don't kill me. I'm sorry. But he was just like, basically, look, I don't want this. I,
Right.
I don't want this responsibility. That's security. No, thank you. I'm staying
Right.
over here. My job's hard enough as it is. But the reality is, like, that's coming, right?
It's
That's
already here. But it's
yeah,
already here. So CyberArk and SailPoint were the first ones to call themselves identity security solutions and not just identity solutions. And we got to ride that marketing for a really long time without having to pay the price of actually owning security. Okay, newsflash, we actually own security now. And that means that you're going to get woken up at 3 o'clock in the morning when there's a breach or when there's an issue, right? Because you're
right.
not just part of the plumbing, right? You're part of the public facing part of this. It's at risk.
Yep. Interesting times indeed. Hey, thanks for listening or watching the Identity Jedi Show podcast. Listen, wanted to do a quick little promo. Identiverse is right around the corner, May 28th through roughly around the 31st of the 1st down in Las Vegas, Nevada. But you can check it out at Identiverse 2024. I can't wait to see you there. Hopefully you are there. I don't have any more discount codes for you because those expired March 31st. But hey, look, it is close. You want to be there. This is the biggest identity conference in North America. I can't wait to see you there. I'll be there hanging out. So come by, see me, grab a selfie. It's going to be fun. It's going to be an absolute blast. I have a session going on Thursday where we're talking about Jedi Masterclass, teaching you all the tips and tricks you need to be a good identity practitioner. No, a great identity practitioner. No, to be an identity Jedi. So we'll see you there. Let's get you back to the pod.
Yeah. I think another part of the interesting times is something we've talked about in the pre-roll as well, is about PAM and IGA coming together. And this is a passion area of mine, obviously, having created a privileged access startup. But you mentioned one of them, CyberArk, right? So they built their own IGA solution on top of their side of their PAM solution.
Which they
You've got
keep trying to, it's so funny. Yes, they did. Real quick aside.
yeah,
They built it, but then when you talk to them, right? They're like, no, we didn't. But all your marketing says that you did. Like,
right,
yeah, well,
exactly. Your
we do
website
it. We're like,
it
yeah,
says
no,
it's
we are, but we are. It's so I'm like, guys, just own it. Like, I don't. So anyway, I think that's very interesting right now. So Cyborg, get it
well.
together.
So
Come on.
CyberArk did it, and then SailPoint acquired Assyrium, so they took their IGA and threw a PAM aside alongside of it, and Okta has built their IGA, which they're calling a workflow thing, which okay, whatever. And they also have a PAM solution, right? So they acquired ScaleFT a number of years ago and continued to market that as a PAM solution, though obviously has limitations. And then you mentioned at the beginning, Beyond Trust having just acquired Entitled this week, which brings both IGA and just-in-time capabilities to that
Yep.
platform. So I think that the answer to, hey, are PAM and IGA a thing that belong together? I think the answer is pretty definitive. The market has decided the answer is pretty definitively yes.
Yeah. Yet another thing I called early, folks. I got
You
the
did.
receipts for the city. You can go check out the blog. I wrote a Pam and IGA love story like 6 years ago. Crazy.
Yeah.
But I mean, but because again, I think that just benefits you be in the space long enough. Like we were kind of there when the origins of this started, right? Privileged access management, it's just like the same things you need to do on PAM or the same things you need to do for any other account. I need to know who has access. I need to be assigning that access. I need to be reviewing that. Like all those same governance capabilities. It's just, again, when we went best of breed, we said, okay, well, yeah, those are a little special because they are different accounts, right? They're like where those accounts are. There's less of those. They have there's
But
more
hold,
protections you
but
want
hold on. I
around them.
think that thinking is exactly why it took so long for people to come together on this, is because
Okay.
people think of privilege access as a set of accounts. It's not. It's a set of entitlements. Where do you manage
Okay.
entitlements? In an IGA.
Yes.
And so I think that this belief that we had that somehow privilege access was different because it's a separate set of accounts kept us stuck in this concept that PAM needed to be its own separate thing for so long. But if you really think about privilege access is really just a special set of entitlements that can be granted to accounts, ideally on a just-in-time basis.
Okay.
That's my own, that's the horse I ride on. Ideally on a just-in-time basis and then taken away, then all of a sudden it makes a lot more sense to think about PAM and IGA in the same space.
So you're absolutely right. And thanks for calling me out on that. And here's the reason why. This is why I love having these conversations, though. But here's the reason why I default to that. It's because when my beginnings of getting around privileged access was, what was the standard? You go and create a separate admin account
That's right.
for like specific, always in Windows for those domain accounts. But even with Linux,
Yep.
there was the root account, or then you created a different account with those. So to your point, like this, how we usually address it was we were creating different accounts. But as you talked about, but we were just creating accounts because we wanted to give it a different set of entitlements and we
Right.
wanted to manage it separately. So yeah, if it's really just about the entitlements, you can manage it at that level. So
You
yeah,
have to get back to first principles about this
yeah,
stuff, right? Because adding bifurcated accounts was the solution, and then all of a sudden password vaults became the way that you protected the bifurcated accounts. And so now all of a sudden you've got two levels of abstraction. You've got a separate password and a separate management solution just so that you can manage special entitlements again, right? But if we get back to first principles, those special entitlements, if we have better ability to manage them on a just-in-time basis, then we don't need all this additional complexity. So many of my Fortune 500 customers have huge headaches with having, whether they call them, personal privilege accounts or A accounts or like whatever they call them,
yep,
like these bifurcated accounts. In some cases, an individual admin might have 3 or 4 of those bifurcated accounts. It does not make the world more secure to have 3 or 4 accounts. It makes the world a pain in the ass for the administrator who has to navigate all this stuff. And so, again, getting back to first principles, think about how do we add those entitlements to the administrator when they need them and take them away when we don't. It's a fundamental shift in the thinking, but it means that PAM and IGA are really the same thing fundamentally.
yeah. I agree. You're winning me over.
Look at that.
Not that I was completely on the other side. It was
I
just
was
me
gonna say
thinking
you're
about
already
it,
there. I don't
but
you wrote the
wait.
paper 6 years ago. I'm not telling you things you don't already know.
But the but I guess where I was going is like also with that set of thinking of like, okay, so we need the standard accounts, right? So
Hmm,
when you go back, like I like what you said, go back to first principles and say, okay, we look at like what are we actually trying to solve? And we come back and look at payment some of the standards that have been set. So the different accounts. And then
yep,
there's the vault hit management, and then there's a session proxy, and then the session management, all these things. It's like, yeah, but
yep.
if we focus on the root problem, like how much of this goes away? Right? Like if I'm able to, I could say that I could still see a benefit for session monitoring, right? Like if I'm able to just in time when you need it, give you the privilege access to what you want, allow you to do your job, remove the access and get in and out. Okay, cool, right? It's kind of when I was like session monitoring, cool. I want to be able to see what you did, right? But I would start to question why. Not saying it's not necessary, because if I'm truly tuned down to giving you just the access that you need, I was like, I've already shelled you in by giving you the access. So there's not anything dangerous that you can do or that I don't know that you're doing based on the access that I've given you. And
And
kind
by
of
the way,
taking it even
you should also be running an EDR solution on those endpoints to make sure that they're not people, even non-privileged users aren't doing crazy, terrible things on them anyway.
right.
And so, like just because you have some just-in-time access granted to your account doesn't mean you have free reign to do crazy things. So your EDR should continue to be operating exactly the same way it did before. Now, one of the things that we explored at Remediant, didn't actually get around to implementing this, is to be able to modify on a real-time basis your EDR policies when a just-in-time access grant is provided. So for instance, let's say PowerShell is blocked on 100% of computers because it can't be used for terrible things by malware, et cetera. But when you provide just-in-time access to David to go, administer a server, hey, maybe we modify the CrowdStrike policy for that duration of that just-in-time access grant to allow PowerShell on them. So things like that, where you're making intelligent applications of identity entitlements to other parts of the security ecosystem as well.
Right. And adding the ability to be dynamic in that state. So, like, I log in. Okay, so now David gets access to PowerShell. He can do his things while I'm working, right? Because this is always the admin's first. Well, sometimes I don't know what I need to do. I gotta be able to
Yep.
figure it out. Well, that doesn't mean you need to have access to everything, but fair point, right? Sometimes you just got to troubleshoot some stuff, and you may need to get access to stuff, and you can't think ahead of time what I'm going to need. But to be able to say, okay, Now still providing that capability in there is like, okay, oh, but I'm also going to need access to these things. Like bake it in right there while I'm working, right? Okay, like whether it's I'm in PowerShell command line, hey, I need to go instead of running these 5 functions, I need to go run this one.
Yep.
Let me put in a request forward via command line. Yes, you got it. Okay, now boom, we'll grant you give you those. And again, like it's all still just in time. Or even if it's just, hey, I got to go into like, oh crap, I need to go do this on this other server as well because there's some things going here. Let me go request for that real quick. Okay, hey, you've already got this. You're granted. We'll include this in your session. Boom. Like it's that part of it. And so I'm going to take this back to like kind of where we started when you said at 13, man, it's been an entrepreneur forever. So much to learn. That user experience, right? Like
Mm.
that, and that's part of the
Yep.
things that I've always kind of pushed with, you know, identity products and teams. It's like, what does the business do and how are they using this? Right? Start developing features that help them do their jobs that allow you to do what you want to do, which is have control and governance and oversight, but where they actually need it. Right.
That's right.
That those are the type of things that I would love to see start getting developed and we take those approaches. One, I think we absolutely have to because what businesses are dealing with right now, the sprawl scale is just ridiculous. You can't
It's
even
crazy. It's absolutely crazy. Now, this wouldn't be a podcast unless we mentioned AI. So, one of the I'm just going to say it because the chat
of course.
GPT bot that's, standing behind me with a gun to my head is, telling me to say this, but this all becomes easier if you think about how do you apply AI to those sort of dynamic rule sets around what kind of access does someone need and when do they need it? Because if you can do that, then it makes life even easier for those users, right? And so without granting a bunch of extra, like you said, access to everything, then you can think about all right, the last 3 times you did this thing, then hey, you needed this other access. Maybe we just give it to you to begin with this time.
Right. Okay. I want to throw a different topic, right? And it's one that we didn't talk about pre-show, but given what we've been talking about right now, like
Hmm.
when it comes down to things like this, like the just in time and the dynamic, granting of the access, right? I really feel like another part of this that I think we finally have to go solve, and I'm gonna put this on the vendors. I'm gonna put this on some of these organizations, kind of like Gartner as well, is like because the other part is audit, right? When auditors come in to go and try and do this compliance, right? Sorry, audit friends, you're not gonna like this part. Cover your ears. I've just talking to customers like some of these audits, the stuff that they're asking them to do, I'm just like that doesn't prove anything.
Right.
Like, show me this control, whatever. Here's a screenshot. What the hell? What? That's not. Or you're taking like written. You're taking the customer at their word for written things that show like, well, this is how we do these controls. Like, there's no real like one. Most of this stuff process that's going around is inefficient. I'm an engineer, so I always think efficiency first. But also, I'm like, okay, why not? Like, if we're doing this and using these tools to go and say, here are the policies. Here's how we putting these in place. Here's how we're making sure these people don't have this access, and we're doing this. Give them access to the tools that come into the tool so they can actually see it. Give them things like, hey, let me go run. Okay, this is the policy control you're saying you have, and it's simpler
Hmm.
than this tool. Okay, I'm going to go run this policy check on a subset of users and come back and go, oh, okay, yep, this actually checks out, right? We can digitally sign audit records. We can people have digital sign approvals. Like, so we can, all the things that they would be looking for to actually show actual real controls, like we can actually do digitally, but we don't. Instead, we just go, show me this, show me a screenshot of what you did. And we take that and run off. Or the auditor has no clue what the hell they're looking at and just goes, okay, yeah, this looks good.
Right.
Like, why have we have this like are auditors the mafia or something? Like, why are we so afraid to go talk to them and go, "Hey, let us help you do this a lot better."
So I have a hypothesis about this, and this is a hypothesis without a ton of supporting data, but I'm interested in your thoughts. But I think the reason why there's not a through line between the thing that's being audited and the actual security control that would actually prove that the thing actually is being done or not done actually gets back to the point I made earlier about it's really hard to find people with infosec experience that were willing to go work in these Fortune 500 companies, even in the engineering teams. Turns out even harder to do it if you're trying to hire someone into the auditing team. And I think that IT auditors for a long time were all about, all right, the policy says this, show me that you're doing that what the policy says, without a deep technology understanding of why the policy is written that way. And in different companies I've worked at, the relationship between the technology team and the audit team or the policy authoring team has been good or bad or indifferent. but I think that there's not a ton of motivation. If you're an IT auditor, there's not a ton of motivation to become a subject matter expert in the technologies that you're auditing, because that's not what's expected of you. What's expected of you is to read this policy, look at the evidence. Does the evidence support the policy compliance? That's it. Does the policy actually do the thing that it's supposed to do? I don't know. It's someone else's problem. And so I think that by not having this holistic view of security, policy control, and then auditing of it, those things are segmented today and there's a disjoint element there. Until that's solved, I don't think the problem you're describing will be solved.
What you're telling me is I should go create a product for auditors to make them do audits better?
Well,
Just
but that's the problem is the success criteria of doing an audit better just means you review more policies or you review the policies faster. It doesn't actually mean that you make sure that the evidence you're gathering during the audit supports the actual the underlying security control. Like I think until we rethink the expectations of what an IT audit actually delivers, I don't think that there's no improvement possible here until we redefine the success criteria.
got it. So
This is
fire
not a
all the
technology
auditors and
problem.
start
This
over.
is this is a people problem.
This is a people problem. Fire all
Yeah.
the auditors and start over again. Gotcha. Okay.
Well, yeah, I think we can upskill them if we motivate them to become subject matter. The problem is that they have no motivation to become subject matter
Yeah.
experts, right? Like that's not the thing that they're being evaluated on because that's not what is a successful audit actually shows today.
Well, I guess okay, so that's where I would say, like, is it I don't necessarily want them to be subject matter experts. I want them to be so I would want perfect world, okay, you're an auditor, what I want you to be is a really good auditor. Your job is to come in and say, "These are things I'm checking for." And I wanna be able to work with you, customers, to say, "Here are the things we're checking for," collect that evidence, right? And be able to spot and see that based on what you said and the evidence I collected that this is correct, right? And so it's not to your point, the responsibility isn't on them to be able to deliver that, right? I do think the responsibility is on them to be able to know what questions to ask, what to be able to look at and say, "Okay, this is sufficient. This isn't sufficient. No, this doesn't really do that." That's the area where I feel so then I go, "Okay,
Hmm.
let's make you better there. Let's give you some better tools to do that, to uncover some of these things and to be able to say that." But then on the other side, for the customer, what are things that we can do to make sure you understand how to get visibility of that process from a control to policy to implementation and what it is, right? So
Yeah.
I think there's kind of two areas. Don't I see that smirk, man. All right,
Well, no,
whatever.
because on one of my Slacks, we've talked about this, right? The next the largest untapped profitable business out there right now is zero critical findings as a service. So it's the auditor firm you could hire that you will guarantee to have zero critical findings as a service, and so it's the complete opposite of what you're describing. But I think there's a lot of desire out there that these audits simply become box checking exercises because IT security leaders feel that they don't provide a lot of value. And I think that there's evidence for that, right? There's evidence to support that hypothesis.
Okay, I need to go. I need to go get some auditors, and we got to bring them on this podcast. We got to start having some discussions. I think so they can tell me where I'm wrong and what I don't. Because like, I'll be honest, I don't know. I do not have a whole lot of experience on the audit side. I have zero experience, and to your point, I have zero desire to know anything about. It's not what I want to do. I'm just like, okay. So I would love to hear that perspective and get more. So if you know of any auditors, send them my way. Let's get them on the show. Let's have a conversation.
All right.
All right, man. So we could do this for hours. We have done this for hours.
Yeah. I remember a few bars and a few drinks that, not totally dissimilar from this.
Many a times. Let's wrap it on this kind of note. What is in where you are today, right? Kind of looking forward. What are you excited about when you look at identity, and what scares you to death?
So the thing that excites me the most about identity is, and I'm going to use the term ITDR here, and with the acknowledgement that that term has been poorly defined, doesn't mean a lot. There was a LinkedIn conversation between Enrique, who's gone to work for Savient this week, by the way, other big change in identity this week. A conversation between him, who essentially minted the term, and a founder who was like, "Hey, I want ITDR to mean this," and Enrique being like, "Well, it means a lot of things, but it doesn't actually mean the thing that you're trying to say it means." Anyway, so acknowledging that ITDR as a term doesn't mean a lot. The thing that excites me about ITDR is the implication that identity has to become part of an integrated security stack. Like it doesn't identity can no longer exist organizationally, technology wise on its own. It has to become a fully integrated part of everything else that's going on. And part of, again, the poorly defined ITDR, part of that means you have to protect the identity systems like you protect the rest of the infrastructure. But it
Yeah.
also means that you can use a better protected identity to go protect other parts of the ecosystem. And so I think that for me, like that acknowledgement that identity has both value and a need to be protected is the most exciting thing in identity today. And I completely
Awesome.
forgot your other question because I was so
What
excited about
what scares you to death about identity? You
that.
look at it and go,
Well, it's popular to say privacy is dead. I might even say that SPI, special personal information, or PPI, private personal information, is dead. Like this week, I think I got 3 breach notifications that my social security number and every piece of data about me has been breached. Like this week, right? So the idea that like I as a human being can uniquely identify myself in a way that an attacker could not is rapidly diminishing. And if it hasn't already gone, and that deeply concerns me for a future where we still have to identify individual human beings when we're logging onto our banking websites or whatever. And I don't, with all these breaches, I don't know how we keep that firewall in place, how we keep that differentiation between me as a real human being and fake Paul who knows everything about me because it's all been breached over time. I don't know how we
right.
do that. There's technology solutions out there, distributed identity. There's some other cool stuff around that, but there's a fundamental problem here that I don't see a path forward on yet.
Yeah. Remind me never to ask you that question again. No.
Cool. Yeah.
Now you scared
Yeah.
me.
I'm full of coffee and sunshine today. What are you talking about?
Oh man. Paul, this is awesome, man. Let me think. We're maybe I might maybe see URSA, but definitely Identiverse.
I'll be there.
Definitely seeing Identiverse. That's a wrap, folks. We're gonna get out of here.
All right, David.
Um,
Great to chat with you as always, man.
yeah, man. So listen, everybody, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching. You guys know what to do. Like, rate, subscribe, comment. Don't forget to check out the Identity Jedi newsletter.com. You can subscribe. It comes out every 2 weeks, kind of ish. Listen, people, I got a lot going on. I get it out to you every 2 weeks. I just say, maybe Wednesday, maybe Thursday, maybe in 3 hours today, if I get a chance to get it out. Point is, look, it comes to your inbox. You get all kinds of news, stuff like this. And I think that's it. That's all I got. Have a good one.
All
Oh,
right.
wait, forgot. You guys know what it is. Be good to each other. Be kind to each
That's
other.
right.
Love each
Can't
other.
forget that important
Can't forget
tagline.
that at all. Yeah. Spread more love, people. See you later. Thanks, Paul.
Cheers.